OneMedRadio welcomes Michael Weickert, President and CEO of SEA Medical Systems, a private medical device company focused on making IV drug delivery safer for patients. The company is developing 4 products to better monitor, administer, and dispose of IV injected drugs. So thank you for joining us, Michael.
Glad to be here.
So I want to start with the unmet medical need here. Why is IV drug delivery currently such a dangerous element of treatment?
Well, first and foremost, intravenous delivery is sending a medication directly into the bloodstream. And within seconds, it's going to be hitting vital organs, the heart and lungs, et cetera. So any error is going to have immediate serious consequences. Human error is probably the leading cause of serious adverse drug events in infusion medicine, but devices actually contribute a lot to failures. They're often difficult to set up, and control of the use of those devices is very important. The most common infusion device errors are actually manually programming incorrect infusion parameters or failure to ensure the right patient receives the right medicine. Interestingly enough, tampering of infusion parameters by unauthorized users also occurs. Between 2005 and 2009, the FDA actually received 56,000 reports of incidents with infusion pumps, and those included 710 deaths that resulted from the mistakes that were caused. And the FDA, as a result, issued 87 infusion pump recalls during that period of time.
Give us an overview of the 4 products in development and how they fit into a larger platform.
So we have 4 products in development: IV Check, IV Waste, Smart IV, and Auto IV for IV medication management and delivery. IV Check is the first product in development. It's designed to rapidly measure a small sample of an IV that's prepared in the pharmacy, and it reports the drug, the concentration, and the diluent, which are the 3 elements that you need to confirm in order to ensure that the IV matches the patient's order and it's safe to administer. Now, it can also be used to determine if a sample from an IV that's being investigated, for example, if something went wrong with the patient, is the correct medication that was intended for delivery. It can be used for looking at drugs that are being disposed of, particularly scheduled drugs like morphine and fentanyl, to make sure that those drugs have not been diverted and replaced with some other substance like saline or dextrose or water, to help catch that diversion in real time. There's really no adequate test for that right now. IV Waste is the second product in development. It's designed to automate the entire drug wasting and documentation process for both that DEA compliance that I was just mentioning and EPA compliance for some of the toxic medications that are not allowed to be disposed of in the normal waste stream of a hospital. So IVs being disposed are identified, the volume and concentration are measured, and the waste is segregated according to its classification, and the documentation required for compliance is automatically generated. Now, the third product is for IV administration. It's called Smart IV, continuously monitors and reports IV delivery, and it's giving you drug, concentration, diluent, just like IV Check, but it also adds flow rate and cumulative dose, because those are the things that you need to know about what the patient is receiving in order to make sure they're safe. It can detect an alarm when serious conditions like the wrong dose or the wrong delivery rate. Auto IV is sort of the ultimate version of the product for IV administration. It wraps this technology up in a smart pump, making it truly smart. Now the pump can automatically detect the drug and the concentration and the diluent, rather than having a manual selection from the menu or a program entry. When you couple this with an electronic medical record, you now have the potential for a truly closed-loop system. The pump can automatically match the drug with the patient order and set up the appropriate delivery rate and time automatically. It can catch and prevent the most serious errors, like this drug is not prescribed for this patient, or we have the wrong drug in this order, or the wrong dose being administered to the patient. Those are the 3 things that are most likely to cause a serious adverse event, death, or serious injury to a patient. Now, all these devices can be essential parts of IV clinical integration with physician orders, patient and patient records, or they can operate autonomously as safety devices in health systems that don't have that integration already. So they have a lot of flexibility in terms of how they can be implemented by hospitals to prevent these serious errors from harming the patients.
So you're obviously touching on costs of malpractice and physician error and human error, but what is actually the financial justification for bringing in more products to curtail human error?
Well, I think a big motivation has happened in 2008 when the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Reimbursement eliminated payment for never events, and those include things like serious IV drug errors. These are things that hospitals are not supposed to allow to happen, and when they happen, the care that's required to restore those patients to health is no longer reimbursed. So the hospitals are highly incented to avoid those kinds of mistakes. There isn't a technology like ours available right now in hospitals to catch these errors in real time, and that's the value proposition that we're offering. By preventing these errors, we expect hospitals to save 2 to 4 times the cost of the use of our systems. That's not including anything about litigation costs or settlement costs for those errors that do occur and the injuries that result. Those costs are things that are seldom reported, but are a very large part of the cost of these mistakes when they occur.
Now, hospital care in general is known as a stubborn industry, sluggish to embrace a lot of new technologies. How are you planning to avoid your products being too costly to be purchased sort of on that large scale?
Well, first let me address kind of the sluggishness of adopting new technologies. It really depends on the benefit and the trade-offs that the hospitals receive. And I'll point you at an example. Pulse oximetry is now taken for granted. You go in the hospital, if they're going to measure your blood pressure and heart rate, they're going to also measure your blood oxygenation. But it wasn't always the case. In the early 80s, we were spending several $1 billion a year on blood oxygen gases, which was a laboratory test done in the hospital lab. It took 25 to 35 minutes to get a result. And the problem was they were trying to measure oxygenation in patients that were on typically opioids like morphine or patients that were under anesthesia. And in those cases, if you get your blood oxygen too low, you're going to do damage to the brain or kill the patient. The problem is that hypoxemia, the condition that we were trying to measure, it can kill patients in 5 or 10 minutes. And the test result took 25 to 35 minutes to get. So it wasn't doing the job. Several thousand people a year were killed in U.S. hospitals from hypoxemia. Along came pulse oximetry, a simple test that could be applied and give real-time information to the oxygenation of the patient's blood. And within several years, all U.S. hospitals that were doing procedures under anesthesia were using it in the operating room. And within several more years, it was everywhere in the hospital. And now when you go in, it's just taken for granted as part of your therapy and part of your care. And the same thing's going to happen with our systems in IV. Initially, it'll be used on the high alert medications, the ones most likely to cause injury or death. It'll be used on the patients that are most sensitive, the patients that are trauma patients that are in OR, the patients that are premature births and other neonatal care that are very sensitive to IV drug errors. And then gradually, it's going to become a standard of care. It's going to be something that you eventually take for granted. If you're getting an IV, of course you're going to instrument that IV to make sure that that IV is not going to harm the patient. One of the interesting things about sort of costs, which I know is kind of where you were getting at, is that as the scale of use increases, the cost goes down. It's just like everything else in terms of cost and scale. We're targeting very low single-digit dollars and potentially at maximum use under $1 per consumable, which is at a small price for the kind of safety we're delivering. The devices themselves, they're going to probably be cheaper than the current generations of smart pumps. That offers both a price benefit and a performance benefit to hospitals. So we're going to make the barriers as low as possible for hospitals to have the latest and greatest safety technology as part of their health system. We don't want price to be the barrier. We want performance to be the benefit.
So discuss the regulatory path here.
We have several different kinds of devices. So the devices in the pharmacy, IV Check and IV Waste, are measuring samples of the preparation or samples of the return to validate them. Those products don't require regulatory approval at all. We actually have received a 513G opinion from the FDA on IV Check, which would be the first commercial device, indicating that they concur with our opinion that it does not require regulatory approval because it doesn't meet the 2 thresholds. There's no patient therapeutic decision made on the results, and there's no patient contact with the device. And therefore, there's no need for regulatory oversight of that product. Now, Smart IV and Auto IV are in a different category. Those are products that are going to be monitoring IV administration and therefore are going to be critical parts of that patient care and safety. Those products will require a 510K regulatory approval. We already have established predicates for that. We already have plans for those filings when those devices are ready for that.
I want to talk about the ease of use here. What is the learning curve?
Oh, boy. I mean, these devices are dead simple. I mean, IV Check, I'll give you an example. IV Check, you take a sample, you put it in a little container that has our sensor in it, you plug it into the device, you press a button that appears when you plug it in that says run, and then you wait several seconds and the answer appears. It's the drug, the concentration, and the diluent. we've taken a commercial model of this device to hospital pharmacies around the U.S., and we've had technicians use it with no training. We give one demonstration, and we give them the device, and we give them an IV sample, and we say, okay, show us how you would use this. And most trained technicians can do this in about 20 seconds. So, it really doesn't get any simpler than this in terms of what we're delivering and how easy it is for technicians to use. The products that are going to be used for IV administration management, a lot of the products are automated. So it's not the kind of setup required under the current sort of smart pump type regimens where you have to learn how to program the pump and all the different entries and menus and so forth that you have to navigate. The pump's doing the work. It's measuring the drug. It's determining what's there. It's setting things up by the EMR. In addition, they're designed so that they can be networked with the systems. If you have a pharmacy system you want to network this with, great. If you have a hospital electronic medical record system or a patient system that you want to integrate the administration systems with, that's great. But if you want to use these as standalone devices, you want to try them off in one unit of the hospital at a time or in one pharmacy, that's fine. You can use these autonomously. You can test them out. You can adopt them slowly as you get comfortable with the technology and as you get used to it.
And I understand that you're planning to expand beyond the IV space, so what will be your additional applications?
So there's what we call kind of the near neighbors to IVs. So detecting counterfeits, for example, things like the Avastin incidences recently that show that people are beginning to take those high-value medications and dilute or replace them with other substances. That's something that we can detect instantly. In the hospital pharmacy, IV Check in a network of hospital pharmacies can be used to detect those instances of counterfeiting as they're occurring. Those hospitals can be detecting those in real time, and the manufacturers can be alerted in real time. Where are counterfeits being found? Beyond the sort of nearest neighbors like that, we're also looking at manufacturing of IVs and other pharmaceuticals. So this technology has been developed to detect drugs. We're detecting them in IVs first, but that doesn't mean that's the only place we can detect them. We can detect everything in bioprocess streams from the ingredients you add to a fermentation or cell culture to the purification that you're doing of that material to the final fill and finish of that product before you're actually sending it out from the manufacturer to the customer. So every step along that path, there are decisions that have to be made about what you do to keep the process within the tolerances of what's approved for manufacturing. Our technology can give the operators real-time information about, are you within your tolerances? Are you actually within what you need to be within to deliver the quality of product that you need to deliver in order for it to be acceptable to go to patients? And that's an important addition in terms of the benefits of make these biopharmaceuticals, which are very expensive to manufacture. And when you have a bad run of a biopharmaceutical, you've just thrown away millions of dollars. Beyond that, in dialysis, one of the coming things in 2014 is that dialysis reimbursement is going to be tied to your ability to show the efficacy of dialysis for the patient. How well has that performed in removing waste products from the patient's bloodstream and ensuring that they're going to have a good health outcome? Our technology can be used on the dialysis itself to show the success of removing ingredients from the bloodstream and purifying that patient's blood, thus restoring them to the best of possible health outcomes. And it can monitor it in real time. So the patient gets treated on dialysis as long as they need to and no longer.
Lastly, I want to turn quickly to your financials. So who are your principal investors, and also what round are you in right now?
We're currently looking at raising a Series C round. Series A was a very small investment round of $1 million. Series B is our first sort of institutional round. J.K.B. Capital out of Chicago did that round with us. And now we're looking at a Series C round. We're looking to raise approximately $10 million. That's largely going to go into the expansion of the technology opportunities, the initial investment into things like sensor manufacturing. Our sensor manufacturing is made by lithography, which is the same process used to make IC chips for computers. So it's a well-known technology designed to produce the same pattern of metals on a material with every single run. And so that's why we're doing this for our sensors, to make sure that the same sensor pattern is made over and over again. But that is an investment that we need to make in terms of bringing that manufacturing capacity up to the point where we can start to do the larger scale testing we need to do to get these products to the point where we can begin to market them.
That was a company snapshot of SEA Medical with Michael Weickert, President and CEO. With OneMedRadio, this is Matthew Margolis signing off.